Welcome to the Heart Rate Variability Podcast. Each week we talk about heart rate variability and how it can be used to improve your overall health and wellness. Please consider the information in this podcast for your informational use and not medical advice. Please see your medical provider to apply any of the strategies outlined in this episode. Heart Rate Variability Podcast is a production of Optimal LLC and Optimal HRV. Check us out at optimalhrv.com. Please enjoy the show. Welcome, friends, to the Heart Rate Variability Podcast. I'm Matt. I'm here with a very special guest today that I'm excited, but I got to give my friend Dr. Dave credit for connecting us with this guest. So all I want to do is welcome everybody. Dave, I'll throw it over to you to do an introduction and get us kicked off today.
Yes, well, I had the pleasure of meeting Dr. Cisco Reyes here, and it's amazing what we found out, how much we actually have in common. So we crossed many times in our lives, but never met each other. It's been really cool getting to know Dr. Reyes here. So what I would like you to do, Cisco, is if you could tell everybody a little bit about your background, where you've been professionally, how you got here, what drives you, what's your motivation, and then what you're currently working on.
Perfect. Well, again, Matt, Dave, thank you so much for having me. It really is one of those situations where it was meant to be. And again, Dave and I were walking next to each other for a long time without ever knowing that we were walking next to each other. And that's kind of the beauty within our industry and our professional realm of just how close we really are. But I'm happy to be here. I'm currently the associate professor within our Health, Human Performance, and Athletics department here at Linfield University, which is a small Division III school right outside Portland, Oregon, in McMinnville, Oregon. In addition to my associate professor duties, I'm the graduate program coordinator for our new Masters of Science in Sports Science and Analytics, where we focus on sport technology and collecting physiological data to help inform decision-making for coaches, strength coaches, rehab professionals, the athletes themselves, et cetera. I think like all of us, we all started off as an athlete and we wanted to stay in athletics for as long as we possibly could. I was a collegiate baseball player here at Pacific University, just right down the road in Forest Grove, Oregon, and knew that I love lifting weights. I love being in the weight room, and I love seeing how strength training and the work in the weight room can transform the mind and the body to be better versions of themselves, which ultimately is my mantra, is elevating and empowering athletes around me to be better versions of themselves. And so strength and conditioning was something that I really had a passion for and still do. After I finished my bachelor's at Pacific University, I earned my master's and PhD back home in Moscow, Idaho at the University of Idaho, where I focused more on baseball biomechanics, improving bat speed of during the swing. But then during my time in school and research, I was a volunteer strength and conditioning coach at the University of Idaho athletics department. So I always wanted to tie athletics with the academics, and I wanted to go to institutions where I felt that I had the opportunity to do that and work with like-minded individuals, again, both academically, but also in the weight room, that wanted to find ways to just constantly improve themselves and also push the student athletes, again, to be better versions of themselves. And that's where Dave and I, where our lives kind of overlapped, was as Dave was graduating from Northern Illinois, I was coming in as a new assistant professor at Northern Illinois. So we know common colleagues and professionals over at NIU. I spent 3 years there and then went to Concordia University here in Portland, Oregon. And I had the opportunity at Concordia, because it is smaller, to do exactly what I wanted to do professionally. Like I said, is really tie the athletics with the academics. So as a professor, I was also the athletic performance director, so I oversaw all the strength and conditioning with the varsity teams. But because of my role academically, I was able to bring in students to basically be my quote unquote assistants, and they could actually see firsthand the concepts within the classroom and how I was applying it in the weight room. I was there for 6 years. And then in 2017, I came here to Linfield with a phone call from athletic director, Gary Kilgore, who said he had a vision of bringing in athletics with academics, which is why he called me, because he knew that was my passion and my specialty. And here we are with this master's program. And it truly is an experiential learning program for our grad students, where we spend less time in the classroom and actually more time on the field, on the pitch, using sport technology to collect physiological data. So I'm very blessed to be where I am. In addition to Linfield, I run the Rise Lab, which is a privately owned business out of Tigard, Oregon, where I focus on strength training and educating middle school and high school athletes to elevate and engage them to be better versions of themselves. So it really is an integrated model that I live my life on, by bringing in my family with the Rise Lab, my work at Linfield, and my passions within education and strength and conditioning.
Well, that is awesome. And I think, like you said, you're tying athletics with academics, and students must just go crazy for that. And I know that anytime you can tie something in the real world with, what you're learning in the classroom, it's going to stick 10 times better. So I can only imagine that your students are extremely engaged, love coming to your classes. And that's the basis of your entire master's program. Is that correct as well?
It is. We wanted to create something unique. And we wanted our students to learn by doing, and not just the professors and the faculty basically telling them what to do, or go find 20 articles, write about it, and come back and present it to the class. Like we introduce them to the technology, we assign them to a team, and they collect the physiological data. Then we come back to the class and just brainstorm and critically think, like, what are you seeing with jump monitoring? What are you seeing with HRV? What are you seeing with some of the cognitive testing that we're doing on a regular basis to ensure that they're mentally fresh, but also physically fresh? And then we just kind of create visual summaries and go through some analyses that we can communicate with our sport coaches, and they ultimately make the decisions. I mean, you two know that they're the coaches. We're not the coaches. We just help them make decisions based off of what the athletes are telling us, either verbally or physiologically, whether they feel it or know it or not.
You can inform the coaches as much as you want, right? But you can't force them.
No. And we understand that.
And we
communicate with them with that from the very beginning. It's like, we're not going to tell you what to do, but if you find these metrics valuable, or even better, what metrics do you want to know? And then we can collect that for you. So communication is extremely important, and we don't want to collect data for the sake of collecting data. And we also tell them, like, we're not using your student athletes as guinea pigs. Like, we're not going to poke and prod them and change anything. Like, we are really profiling and benchmarking and monitoring. Like, those are the three things that we're doing. And at that point, it's your program. You can do, what you want to do, but we've been fortunate to have coaches that trust us and that buy into what we're trying to do.
So I'm curious, like being an athlete myself through college, a lot of metrics that's what I love about sports is you have win-loss records, you have batting averages, points per game, rebounds per game. I mean, it's so concrete in so many ways. How have you seen, like, recently, there just seems to be this real awareness of biometrics and sort of what's going on underneath the skin. I just love, as you've been in this arena now and interested in it for even longer, how have you seen a shift in sports, or where do you see the shift in sports of really digging deeper outside just the performance, but what's behind the performance in a lot of ways?
I think for future directions within this idea of biometrics and sports sciences, I think finding that balance between the monitoring side and just toughening it out and doing it, and I think we have coaches that really want to push their athletes, and we can collect the data and show them, like, yeah, you're fatiguing them, and but maybe that's a part of their plan. And I think at least I think we're starting to dig out of it a little bit, but the pendulum kind of swung a little bit too far, where as soon as an athlete, reports like they're in the red or whatever, it's like automatically shut them down, or they're going to do a completely different practice, or they're going to do a completely different regime for the next couple of days because they are either neuromuscularly fatigued or emotionally fatigued or physiological fatigue, whatever it may be. But when we're talking about programming in general, I mean, there's overreaching, there's also overtraining. Yeah, we don't want to overtrain them, but there are times where we do want to overreach. We want them feeling fatigued because we know that as a part of the ultimate plan, we will then incorporate some sort of recovery or cycle change that's then going to allow them to super compensate, several weeks down the road. So, the collection of the biometrics, I think, is a little bit more longitudinal and shouldn't necessarily be like day by day by day. Yes, you can make slight adjustments here and there, but I mean, I think that I think the most recent example is things like Kawhi Leonard, where you hear stories where he just shows up to the facility at 4:00 on a 7 p.m. game, and he tells the coaches like, I'm not playing today. It's like, well, why not? It's like, I just don't feel it. It's like, well, I get, again, I'm not in the building, but I understand that, but it's the playoffs. Like, are you able to push through this a little bit, like this kind of do or die? And then I think the other side of the future direction, and something that I'm more passionate about, is the profiling and benchmarking. And whenever I talk to people about the things that we do at Linfield, the first thing that a lot of people think about is like, oh, it's like Moneyball. It's like, in a way, it is. It really is. Like, can we collect, these physiological and psychological data? Can we quantify the 6 aspects of athleticism? And then can we correlate it to on-field performance? Like you said, does it translate to wins and losses? Does it translate to slugging percentage in baseball and softball? Does it translate to points per game in basketball? Does it translate to minutes played in soccer? Because, if you're available, you're going to help your team the most. And so I think that's a future direction where we need more data, and we need more collaboration with a large number of sports scientists to see, are there physiological and athletic characteristics that can almost, I don't like using the word, but can almost predict performance. So then coaches know who to recruit, who fits their system, and then therefore they can say this person's going to thrive in our system.
Yeah, I love the Kawhi example, because I'm formulating this unscientific backed theory in my head. Dave, I'd love to get your opinion on this too. I wonder, like, we have these, and I think if you base anything on somebody like LeBron, you might be so far out on the standard deviations, probably doesn't normalize to the rest of us. But I sort of wonder, like him, Tom Brady, we have these folks who normally would have retired doing amazing things. Especially, I mean, LeBron does stick out because basketball, you can't stand behind big dudes and just throw the ball. You are actively involved every play. I sort of am wondering what we're seeing with the Kawhis are we hitting a point where we are sacrificing short-term availability for a longer-term career? Like, that's what I'm wondering, if we're seeing the load management. And I'm more of a basketball fan than any other sport, but like we're just in this time. Well, Larry Bird would have played through that, but Larry Bird had a relatively short, especially at his best, career, if you look at it. So Michael Jordan retired because he was so burned out. He was also like smoking cigars before games too. So like, I kind of wonder, like, this hyper focus on even Kawhi, if you listen to people that work out with him, he's so meticulous and works so hard, but it's like a fine-tuned machine that will break down maybe in the short term, but will perform for 20 years instead of 12. Which works if you're a really good like Kawhi, not so much for my basketball career, which was going to be over my senior year of college. And just wonder if you're seeing anything like that, especially when you look at professional athletes.
So I agree that that's such a tough spot. And Cisco, you hit it right on the head, where you have to balance that. Where is it? You just got to push through this. And where is it? okay, you need to recover. Because I come from a background in sports that are very tough. It's I come from ice hockey, I come from boxing, I come from fighting professionally in mixed martial arts. Like, there is no, I'm not up for it today, coach. It's no, you get out there and you push your hardest no matter what you feel like. You stuff those feelings down and you just go through it, right? You threw up, big deal. You keep going. You got hit in the face, big deal. Going. But obviously those sports also have a very short-lived career. So yeah, that is an interesting question there as well. But from where I'm sitting, I always have to go with, it is maybe the quote unquote smart thing, but is that the right thing as well? So I don't know. So Cisco, how do you guys handle that right now with your athletes?
It's more of and it's obviously still a work in progress because our grad program is, I mean, we're only finishing up our second year, so we're still pretty new, but it's definitely not a shutdown type of thing. I mean, our coaches don't want to hear that so-and-so shut down because they're tired. I mean, they're obviously not going to, hear that. So it's more of modifications, I guess is the best way to put it. So our sports performance director, Ella Maliska, like she has a master's degree in strength and conditioning and sports science. Her dad is one of the top-notch sports scientists in the world. So she completely understands and supports what we're doing and how it's going to help her be a better professional. So as we go through some of the jump monitoring, as we go through what we hope to be incorporating HRV with our teams, that she understands that if someone comes in with a red, whether it's a questionnaire, jump height's lower, reactive strength index is lower, HRV is lower, that she then knows what to do for their specific programming for that day, so that she doesn't run them into the ground and knows that they still got practice later on today. Mm-hmm. So she does a really good job of adjusting programs, whether that's decreasing volume, obviously decreasing intensity, making a little bit more time for mobility work, or just kind of, lower intensity type of aerobic work to kind of help them recover. And so we wouldn't have this program if we didn't have buy-in from everybody involved within our athletic department and then across campus. And like I said, we're very blessed that she gets this and she understands the benefit of it. We're incorporating a new athlete management software that houses all of our data, that makes it easier to communicate with our sports medicine staff and our sports performance director and their sport coaches and the athletes themselves, to say, they might be reporting something with questionnaires, but physiologically their HRV's up and they're still jumping as high as they normally do, as fast as they do. So like you said, Dave, like that's just go, like, you're fine. Like you might be feeling tired, but at least physiologically, your autonomic nervous system and your neuromuscular system is saying that you're fine. So that's just going to take communication. But that's our model, at least for right now, with how we handle things here with our student athletes.
So Cisco, with mentioned the longitudinal or linear glance, focusing on that more than the day-to-day. So with that, like, we know that when we watch somebody over the long term and they are stressing themselves and pushing themselves, that we're going to, like HRV, for example, to start to decrease, right? And then we have to reach a certain point where we're going to pull them out and do the recovery process, as you mentioned. But we know that if we keep pushing them, then the next time we push them, we can push them a little bit harder before they fall, right? And then we help them recover, and then we can push them a little bit harder on that next time, right? And we can keep pushing. So over the long term, we're seeing this tremendous growth out of a person because we are pushing them out of that comfort zone on a consistent basis. So I know you mentioned HRV, and of course that's what we want to talk about. But what else do you guys use? So you guys are using HRV. What else do you use to measure recovery and to decide when to pull somebody back into recovery as you're going through that that long plan?
So our biggest monitoring tool, at least this past year, has been counter movement jump testing, where we've tested teams 1 to 2 times a week, usually done before their lifting session with our sports performance director, where we have them jump 2-3 times, counter movement jump. So with the wind up, the squat down, hands on their hips the whole time, because we just want to see what the lower body performance is doing. And there are specific metrics that we look at. And when it comes to force plate jumping, we use Hawkin Dynamics. And Hawkin Dynamics has specific thresholds built into the software that gives the red, amber, green alert for those metrics. So if it's something green, that means they're actually doing better than they were compared to their rolling average over the past several days. Amber's just kind of like they're pretty much the same, might want to keep an eye on this one. And then red just means that it's significantly lower, their score significantly lower than what their rolling average was. So that's what we're using right now. With this new athlete management software, subjective questionnaires are built in as well. And that is something that we are going to incorporate with teams next fall, basically a kiosk system in the weight room. So as soon as they walk in, they'll just fill out the subjective questionnaire that gets a sense of their soreness, their moodiness, their fatigue, their soreness levels. And then we can take that with their jumping data to get a sense of, okay, they're very fatigued, or looking at the trends over the past couple days, they're feeling great. So therefore, Ella or myself can get a better idea of what their program is going to look like for that session, but then also the recommendations that we'll give them throughout the day leading into practice and then after practice, whether that's more soft tissue therapy with foam rolling and other kind of quote unquote massage modalities, or if you can just get on a treadmill and set it at 3% and just walk for 20-30 minutes as a way to recover. So we want them moving, but we want them moving appropriately based off of their recovery status. And then, like I said, we're hoping that we can incorporate HRV with at least one team this coming fall. So now we've got more of an autonomic nervous system type of response to their stress levels, especially with their students. So school and finals and living situations, and they might be working, and so social situations, like all those things come into play that we can really monitor their overall stress levels.
Yeah, that was kind of what set up my question really well, was like, I don't want to take the fun out of the college experience for student athletes, and I wonder, like, one, I think for me as a college basketball player, it would have been really nice to say, hey, we probably should get this dude into therapy. He's not sleeping well. He's stressed out all the time. Like, this dude needs he just needs a psychologist. He'd get this dude some help, because I'm sure my HRV was in the toilet. Now I could show up for a game and perform at an adequate level, but I wonder what I could have achieved. So I wonder, like, in your role, when you talk about, maximizing performance, we know if they're having a heavy night drinking or two, or staying up till 2 a.m. on Red Bull studying for test, or doing other funner stuff than studying for a test. Like, there's a lot of these lifestyle things that probably contribute, especially to heart rate variability, but performance, now that we know those are connected. How do you approach those issues with your athletes?
Matt, I remember what it's like in college being a student athlete. And when you're 18, 19, 20 years old, you think you're invincible, and you know that, like, I'll recover, I'll be fine, I'll bounce back. And they can. They're obviously very resilient, both mentally and physically at their age. It comes down to one of my mantras: education. Just educating them on, what's good, what's bad. But then, similar to what we talked about with the coaches, it's ultimately up to them. Like, they're the ones making the decisions. And even when we do some of these tests, we always preface the testing by saying, we're not here to judge. We're not judging you on on any of these things. We just need to get a sense of what you're doing, how you're moving, how you're feeling. And we always phrase it in a way that we're trying to help you be better. We're trying to help you be a better athlete. We're trying to help you to become a better student. And most importantly, we're trying to help you become a better and more educated person, because you're only going to be playing sports for 4 years. Beyond that, we're hoping that we're setting you up that you know how to take care of yourself, because you've got the rest of your life to handle work and family and bills and stress and commuting and all that type of stuff. So we just have to educate. We just have to empower them that they make the right decisions. Because I know what being a college athlete is like, and I want to have fun too. And we want them to have fun, but maybe just choose the right moments to have fun, and not the day before a big conference basketball ball game. and being here 6 years, small Division III liberal arts university, the students get it. They understand that they're not Division I in regards to athletes, but they have a very unique situation where they can get a really, really good education, but still play very competitive athletics. So I haven't noticed any sort of issue with it. I mean, our football program has like the longest active winning streak in NCAA across all 3 levels. It's like 66 years straight of a winning season. They're in, the Division III tournament every year. Our softball team consistently ranked within the top 5 year in and year out. Our baseball team historically has been extremely good. I mean, we just have very good athletics, which then shows that we have good coaches, but we also have very good student athletes that understand their role and how to take advantage of their time here at Linfield.
And once you are incorporating HRV, you guys will just be number one in everything. That's
across all sports. You're going to
all sports, all divisions. Yes.
All sports, all divisions. We'll be beating U of O in track. I mean,
There you go. Optimal HRV versus Nike. I like it. We're ready for them.
So, one thing that I should mention to you as well, talked about his basketball career. So Matt is 6'7", by the way. So you can't tell that at the moment.
Normal sized on Zoom.
Yes. But I wanted to backtrack back to you were talking about the vertical jumps. Is that a daily, taking that every single day when athletes walk in, or most days, I should say?
Most days, yeah. 2 days a week, usually 3 days a week would be ideal. But most of our teams in season are only lifting 1 to 2 days a week. So, and understandably so. So we usually just get them to jump 2 days a week, and we do it similar to the questionnaire, similar to HRV. We don't want them warmed up. We just want them to come in, they do their 3 counter movement jumps, and there are just a few select metrics that we look at to monitor what their fatigue levels are. When they're jumping on force plates, we're getting tons of metrics on one jump for each of the athletes. So we went back and looked at the literature and found that here are maybe the top 3 or 4 up to maybe 6 metrics that really mean the most. Now, in regards to fatigue, there are other metrics that can, pertain more to performance, but we're using it more to monitor fatigue. So it's extremely quick, and can be extremely valuable to get a sense of how well their neuromuscular system is communicating with each other before their lift, and then for the rest of their day for school and practice.
That's really cool.
And that's a maximal effort on that, correct?
Maximal effort. And we have to verbally remind them that, because as you can imagine, with volleyball, 7 a.m. lift on a Monday, and they play on Friday, Saturday, they're probably traveling some on Sunday. They come in and, you don't blame them, right, for being tired. So we just have to remind them, like, I know you're tired, but you just give me all that you got for these 2-3 jumps. And they've been compliant. I mean, again, they get it. They understand. And when you do enough testing, you can look at a jump both visually and then also looking at the tablet and the numbers to be like, okay, like you could do better than that. And then they're like, okay. And then they'll, do the last 2 with good effort.
Awesome. Well, that'll be really cool to see HRV correlating with that.
Yeah.
And then as you guys get into to that too, doing some breathing exercises too. I think that would be amazing to see how that affects some of the athletes and whatnot. But Matt, did you have a question there?
Yeah, I wonder, like, I think there's an interesting, I don't know if you've seen something that I might help me too, is the idea of strength training on heart rate variability. I think there's like for me now being in my 40s, I know the benefits of strength training where I'm at now. I'm interested, like, because you're not necessarily raising heart rate, you're putting strain on the body, but sort of, I could probably predict what a hard 2-mile all-out run would do to your heart rate variability. Do you have any idea, like, after lifting, are we seeing similar kind of stress? Do you have any ideas what you're going to kind of see post lifting and how that might kind of impact heart rate variability or just overall fatigue moving forward?
That's a really good question. I myself don't know firsthand the HRV changes pre-post, like pre-lift versus post-lift. I mean, I don't know. That is something that excites me in the sense of utilizing HRV with, a couple of our teams starting this fall, is having them do it the morning of, when they first wake up, and then tell them, bring your straps. You obviously will have your phone with you. Now, after you lift, recover for about 10 minutes, and then let's do HRV and just kind of see, what it looks like. Within the weight room, as a strength and conditioning coach, we can easily adjust lifts based off of what the HRV is saying or their jump data, where we can still get them to work, but we're just going to minimize either the volume or the intensity so they can recover. So one thing that I used to do when I was in the weight room more often, actually training athletes than I am now, is if I saw someone that was, really in the red, whether it was through questionnaires, we weren't using HRV at the time, but questionnaires, or just some sort of like velocity based measurement, like a jump, or trying to move like an empty barbell as fast as they can, and they're moving slow. I remember there was one time I had a men's soccer team. It was a 6:30 lift. They played the night before we were supposed to lift. They all just came in, and you could just tell. There were no measurements. I could just tell these guys were dying. So they didn't want to be there. They didn't want to lift. So I just said, all right, we're going to go up to the gym. And I had two student assistants at the time. I said, gather all the rubber mats that you can, grab all the foam rollers, go up to the gym, and I want you to shut all the lights off. So we went up to the gym and we did 30 minutes of, I'm not a yoga instructor, but we did 30 minutes of like yoga type stuff where we would do crocodile breathing. We would do some foam rolling. We would do some mobility stuff. And then after the 30 minutes, I just flipped the lights back on, and the looks on their faces, it was completely different. It was complete. I mean, they just looked more rejuvenated. And I think they thought that they were going to come in and I was just going to hammer them. And I'm like, I'm not doing my job if I just stuck to the script and just did our heavy deadlifts or, bench or whatever it may be. We can also change it in the sense of making it more neuromuscular and not so much cardiovascular, in the sense of the lift itself. So we can just focus on 15-20 minutes of pure just like power training. So whether it's like med ball throws and like low level plyometrics or kettlebell swings, or maybe not so much Olympic lifting because that is very complex for the neuromuscular system, but just finding ways to keep them what I call twitchy, and then getting them out, and then they're done at that point. So good strength and conditioning coaches will be able to think creatively and think on their feet and go in deep into their toolbox to say that if I've got these 5 who are feeling fresh, they're going to stick to the script. If I've got these 5 who are showing signs of fatigue, okay, we're going to take the same program, but we're just going to tweak the volume. We're going to tweak the intensity, maybe regress some of the exercises so they're not as complex. So you don't have to quote unquote think as much, and then you're out. You move on the rest of the day, and then again educate them on sleep and hydration and what are you eating. Try to go home and take like a 30-minute power nap between classes and practice, or something like that.
I love it. I think that this is an area that we'll learn a lot about over the next really few years. Is like, we know that low heart rate variability can predict injury, but it may be that we just are pushing ourselves where we just don't have that much. And I think strength training is going to be an interesting area of not necessarily something that strains the cardiovascular system in the same way, but I think there's a huge question there that folks like yourself can really help fill in. What do we see if somebody's in red and they lift hard? Are we really decreasing it, or is that better than doing a hard cardiovascular today? It can almost be part of an active recovery, or do we pull back a little bit? And I think that's where I see a lot of folks are kind of asking questions about where does strength training kind of fit into all of this. So that's exciting to know that you're already really thinking about that philosophically in your approach as well.
And again, I feel confident experimenting, if that's the right word, experimenting with something like this topic where you get pre-post HRV, because I just want to go back and say our students are very engaged when it comes to this stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, they're here for school as well as sports. But, I'm just going to use our volleyball team as an example. Like I've got two going to be seniors, more or less captains who are exercise science majors and are two of the most engaged students in the class whenever we're talking about, neuromuscular stuff or, cardiovascular type of work like the HRV. Like they eat that stuff up. And so going into the team and say, hey, Marina and Paige, can you two measure HRV now after your lift and let me know what your numbers say? And again, the compliance with our student athletes here have always been really, really high because they're engaged. They get it. They understand. They want to be better. And going back to the previous question, one thing I tell them too, it's like, do you guys want to get sick? And they're like, oh, no. Like you can't afford to get sick. I'm like, well, that's why we're helping you track this stuff is we don't want it to get to the point where, yes, you're hurt, but then now you've got like a cold in the middle of your conference season. And that's obviously going to, hinder your performance as well. So it's things like that they understand. They really understand.
Awesome.
So Cisco, with the from the strength and conditioning coach aspect, or even the coach is aspect, the logistics of this to come as well, where it's so much easier when the entire team is doing the exact same thing. So when you think, oh, now you have, as you were saying, these 5 athletes that have to do this program and these 5 athletes that need to do this program, and then the rest of you are doing this. Now that's a lot more work for the coaches. That's a lot more work, for the people who are heading up the strength and conditioning programs. So I think that's another hurdle that we need to overcome, and I can only imagine is a challenge for you as somebody doing that, but then to try to get coaches to do something different for different athletes. So I wanted to talk on that, but then with the HRV itself, doing that pre-post workout is awesome to do, and so you guys know we should see a drop in HRV. Especially if we're pushing somebody throughout that weightlifting program. But it's the recovery side that's going to be really cool, is where you can actually see that person recover from their workout when you do that, post-exercise measurement of HRV, and then you can do hourly, or every 2 hours or so to actually see their HRV start to come back and see their autonomic nervous system beginning to recover throughout that day. And then, of course, the next day we have that global impact too. So it'll be awesome to see. But yeah, to the logistics, is that a challenge to overcome, or do you foresee that as a challenge as well?
That's a really good point, Dave. That is a challenge. And it's funny because when I was in the weight room more training athletes, and I would have, again, a group that needed more recovery, couldn't go as hard. At least that's how I felt based off what I saw. It was really easy for me to pivot and just be like, okay, like we're going to have you two, again, hop on a spin bike, like what we call high intensity continuous training, where you just hop on a spin bike, you crank the resistance up like really, really high, and you're just going to sludge through this pedaling for 20 minutes. It sounds brutal, but it's actually a really good recovery tool because it's all concentric because you're on a bike. It's really easy for me to do that, and I'm more than willing to do that. I also coach a club softball team here in the area, and I coached high school baseball. And as a sport coach, when I get that, it's annoying. Like in the sense of when I have someone that comes and says, "Oh, I can't do X, Y, Z." As a sport coach, I'm like, God, like really? Like you can't do, like I have this nice practice plan that we're going to work through, and now you're telling me that you can't do. So it's like the two different types of hats that I wear. One of it, I'm more understanding, and then the other one, it's like we have things to do. We only have 2 hours. Like you got to be able to do this. It absolutely is a challenge, and a part of what we're doing right now within our sports science and analytics program, and again, we communicate this to the coaches, is we just want to collect data for the next 3 years on your team. We're not going to necessarily change anything, but we're just going to collect all of this data so then you can go back in retrospect and say, we had a really good year in 2022, or we had a really good year in 2023. Now it's 2024, 2025. Well, why don't you look back and see what were you doing practice plan wise, or in their situation, like periodizing like their programming for practices and training leading into games. Did you do anything different, and why, and how that correlates to maybe how well that you did? And if we start to see certain trends, then that could be the data that's going to drive them to change maybe their practice plans, where they are going to have to be a little bit more flexible, or they're already going to have to plan different, like 2 different types of practices on that day, because they know they're going to have a group that's going to be tired, and they know they're going to have a group that's ready to basically attack the day. I think good sport coaches are able to be flexible and change on the spot. Again, that doesn't mean that they have to drastically change their program, but they can at least take a group and say, all right, instead of this drill, I'm just going to use it as an example. Instead of doing it for 20 minutes, you're going to do it for 10. And for the other 10, you're going to go off with the athletic trainer or the sports performance coach, or you're going to do some sort of like recovery modality. So you're still getting the drill, but you may not necessarily be going as long or as hard as maybe the others who are fresh. With some teams, like our men's soccer and women's soccer, we do incorporate GPS. So that can come into play as well, to be like, all right, you notice how on Mondays, your load metric was really high, or your distance was really high. Remember when you did that in 2021 and you saw these rash of injuries, your win-loss record was really like, again, we're just collecting it, and then you can go back and look to see what works. But it is a barrier for sure. And that's kind of the buy-in piece. That's why we're not really making the changes with the sport coaches just yet. We're just giving them the data at this point. But again, our sports performance director, she understands what needs to happen, and she's good enough to know that, all right, we're going to shift, we're going to adjust this for this group, and we're going to do this for the other group.
Well, and I think it's, what I would be fascinated to see, because the good and the bad about heart rate variability, the good is it's a universal measure of how well you're handling or recovering from stress. Sort of the negative side of that is stress. It's all stress. So it's not just physical, but like, okay, it's finals week. So I really, what I'm fascinated with, what you're going to find is like on some of the other the jump tests, for lack of the technical word that I'm thinking, but like that paired with heart rate variability is, you may be during like finals or midterms, stress out. Does a red HRV or a low HRV score always correlate with a lower vertical, or other physical tests that you're doing? Because it might, but you can also argue, I just need to get out from the library and studying, so I cannot wait. There were days I just couldn't wait to get in the gym because I didn't have to think that much. Games I had to think, but a practice I could just run, and if I missed a shot, nobody cared, nobody won or lost, but I could just get out of the library and that piece. So I'm really interested to see how that sort of correlates with one another, and then those really great outcome metrics that sports gives you on top of that is really exciting.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because I was actually just thinking of that yesterday, but here's an example of this. So when I was at Concordia working with their women's soccer team, it was August, so they're all back for fall camp. Again, I wasn't doing HRV at the time, but I was doing subjective questionnaires. Yeah. So every morning they would fill out, 5 questions that they would just give a number to 1 through 5. Then I would tally the numbers up and their total score. Higher means they were less stressed. Lower number means that they were more stressed. And there was this one girl for about 4 or 5 days in a row. She had really low numbers. Like she was reporting fatigue and lack of sleep and moodiness and all this type of stuff. And I went to the head coach and I was just like, so how's so-and-so doing in practice? And he was like, fine. Like, I don't notice any drop off. And, and he asked me why. And I'm like, well, you might want to keep an eye on her because she's reporting X, and he was kind of surprised because she actually had been practicing, pretty well. And the beauty in monitoring, and I think for me, the beauty of incorporating something like HRV is the mentoring and the education piece that I'm trying to, hammer in regards to, my purpose and my passion for what it is that I do here at Linfield and at the Rise Lab, is now it gives me a chance to communicate with the student athlete to get a sense of what's going through their head. And most importantly, for them to know that you have coaches and faculty here that support you and are here to help you.
Yeah.
And that athlete, when I approached her, she was homesick. Yeah. So she's from Hawaii. She was homesick. So she couldn't sleep. I think she said there was something else going on at home that I didn't ask. It's not my business, but all it came down to is that she was homesick. Like had nothing to do physically, had nothing to do with the practice, nothing to do with the lifts. Is that when she was back in her apartment, she just couldn't stop thinking about not being at home.
Yeah. And
so then we could create that support system because there were other girls from Hawaii on that team that were able to kind of prop her up. The head coach had an idea. So that's that example of where the stress may not be from lifting and training and practicing games, but it's all the other stuff that's happening in their life because they're humans, they're student athletes. And HRV is going to allow us to kind of peel that layer off so that we can say, we're here to help. Like if there's anything we can do with mental health and the emotional side and, finals is too much, school is too much, we're here to help, and we're here to be a support system.
Awesome.
And that's so cool, and brings up the great point. Within any kind of tracking, but especially something that gets talked about a lot in the world of heart rate variability, is that a reading without any context is meaningless, right? And that's where context is so important with these things, because without proper context, you don't understand what is going on. And that's a perfect example of it. And so cool, that we do have these different sources. So I know we are wrapping up here, and we're getting towards the top of the hour here. So Cisco, I wanted to ask, from somebody who is an expert in the area of performance and recovery, what are some of your personal or as a coach, from the coaching standpoint, some of your favorite recovery strategies?
Mine is sleep. That's
number one.
I think I get a hard time from my wife, because every time I come home, it's like I just want to sleep. Like that's just my thing. But no, sleep. I mean, not to beat a dead horse, but we all know sleep, that it's an easy and free exercise or recovery modality. I mean, it really is. And so, we could save for another topic, but all the ways we can monitor sleep and sleep hygiene, and it really is important. And I think you two would agree with me that, we feel different when we get a good night's sleep. When we get that deep sleep, we're able to get that resting heart rate and our respiratory rate down really low, and we just feel different. Other recovery methods for me, Matt mentioned it earlier, at least this is for me personally, but it's something I also program, is just active recovery. So just walking, just go on a low intense walk. At our house, we actually have I built a treadmill desk on our treadmill. And so I'll just set it to 1.5 miles an hour, and I'll just set 1.5 mile an hour at 1% incline. And I'll just walk as I'm on my laptop at the same time. So I'm able to get work done, but at least I know that my body is still moving. I know a lot of our student athletes here swear by foam rolling, whether again, it's with a foam roller or those tiger tail, type of stick things. That is something that I for me personally, I need to make it more of a priority. I do see a massage therapist once a month, just to kind of help with muscle tightness. I commute 45 minutes each way. I have a lot on my plate, so I do see a massage therapist once a month, and for me personally, that helps. That really helps. And he or she always tells me like, wow, like you're really tight here. It's like, well, yeah, especially up here. It's like, yeah, you didn't have to tell me. That's why I'm here to see you, because I am really tight. And then they educate me. Like, yes, I'm in the field, I educate others, but it's always nice to hear from another professional that says, Cisco, you need to do, these types of things, like drink more water. Like, what are you eating? I mean, that's another recovery is diet that I try to educate others, and people that know me best know that the diet, that's my biggest weakness is my diet. I have too much of a sweet tooth. I don't eat the right things. I eat a lot of inflammatory based foods because to me it tastes good. So if I could be better at the diet part, I feel like I would recover way better. But I think sleep would be number one. Sleep would definitely be number one on my list, and finding ways to fill your cup, whatever that is. And I tell students that as well, like whatever it is that you need to do to fill your cup, everybody does it differently. You need to make time for yourself. Yes, you've got school. Yes, you've got training, you've got lifts, but I always ask them like, so what are you guys doing on the weekends? And, I think they're like going back, I don't think they're going to tell me what they do on the weekends. Right. But, I always say, make sure you guys, do something fun, do something that puts a smile on your face, whatever that is, because that's definitely probably more emotional than it is physical. You two know that when you do something that you really enjoy, almost like a hobby, you just feel different after that.
100%. I want to applaud you, and for all the listeners out there. There it is, straight out of the mouth of a sports science PhD here. And the best recovery is not a $50 sports drink, right? It is sleep. Oh my gosh, right? The basics. If you're doing the basics right, everything else just falls into line. That is so awesome. Such great advice. So thank you so much. Did you have anything?
No, Cisco, I just want to thank you for a great episode today. Where might people, we'll put some stuff in the show notes, but if people want to follow up, where would people find you? Like I said, we'll put the links in the show notes.
Yeah, Dr. Dave knows I'm very active on social media. I don't consider myself or striving to be what they call a social influencer, but I want to be a social educator. Awesome. So I use my my Instagram platform, just pumping out information on all things sports science and analytics, strength and conditioning, just kind of sharing experiences that I've gone through in regards to, again, exercise, stress, training, stuff on like the clinic that I was just at, over the weekend, just kind of what's going on in my world. And so the best way to get a hold of me is through Instagram, and it's my handle is at _rise_lab. And so, yeah, that's a really good place to get some fun and educational content on sports science, as well as a way to communicate, get a hold of me. Yeah.
Awesome. And we'll throw that in the show notes as well, in case anybody missed it. I logged into my Instagram account for the first time in like 6 years yesterday. So you're a good inspiration, and I have logged into mine way more than Dave has logged into his. So you are an inspiration for both of us, my friends. Well, Cisco, it's an honor to work with you. This has been an amazing episode. Philosophically, I'm really excited because it's such a good fit, and I'm excited to learn with you. And we'll have to have you back on soon as you start to implement HRV and learn some of those lessons together. So really appreciate your time and how you think about this. I wish you were around in my college career. I could have been much healthier because I was just sitting there with the ice cream machine and drinking Mountain Dews and the Sunday bar that was free. in the
Well,
cafeteria. So
no, I get it. I mean, you two would understand if I know what I know now and I knew it back then, I would have been a totally different person, not just student athlete. I would have been a totally different person. But that's why I do what I do, is I'm trying to educate these kids to basically don't make the same mistakes I did.
Right.
I'm not saying it was bad, but just again, taking care of myself and how I train for sports. Like don't do what I did. Like be better than what I did and be better than what I am right now. And so that's my passion and passion and purpose is to push them to be better versions of themselves. So thank you two for having me on. This was a lot of fun. And yeah, anytime that I can come back and just chit chat with you guys and learn from you two as well, I mean, I'm all for it. So thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much. And thanks to our audience for joining us again. Again, show notes will be at optimalhrv.com, and we will see you next week. Thanks so much, Cisco.
Thank you.